They were coming off a diamond-selling album, a hard rock band that was at the peak of their career with a singer-guitar duo that was really second to none. She had just hit the top of the charts with a rock-pop song that had many really excited about her future. And then this hard rock band, they lost their singer, and the guitarist ended up crossing paths with the female singer I just mentioned. And he offered her what may have been the most coveted role in all of music. One of the great what-if stories of rock and roll is coming up in an exclusive interview with this great front woman. It's coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. Make sure that you subscribe below right off the bat. Click the bell so you never miss out on our daily content. We have interviews with the legends coming up, so many great stories behind songs. Also, check us out on Patreon for even more content. That's below as well. Oh, it might have been. Coming off 1984, Van Halen was definitely at their commercial peak. And everybody knows what happened next. I mean, Diamond Dave went on his own. He started a solo career. He released some cover songs. Tried to do a movie, never really went anywhere. He would eventually hook up with virtuoso Steve Vai. Great thing for him. Van Halen brought on Sammy Hagar, of course, the Red Rocker. They got to work on 5150, their first #1 album. But today's episode is not about that. It explores what might have been. You know, Eddie Van Halen had several singers in mind before he brought Sammy Hagar on, including Patty Smyth of Scandal, who had just bombed the top of the charts with The Warrior. Eddie actually offered the role to her. He also had an idea to do an album with many different singers. He really wanted to work with Daryl Hall and Joe Cocker and Steve Perry, amongst others. Coming up, an insightful interview with Patty Smyth about Eddie Van Halen making an offer that no singer could ever refuse. But she did. She tells how she almost fronted the female Van Halen. We also have the Red Rocker Sammy Hagar's take on that time frame. It's the Van Halen multiverse. I guess you could say the best of infinite worlds. Got some great interviews coming up next. Now, as we go into these interviews, I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear, the glasses I adorn daily. So you really need to get yourself on the Zenni plan. You're going to never go back. You can go to the link right up here where the info button is and click on it. Go design your own look. You can get up to 80% off regular retail prices. Get a brand new pair of prescription glasses delivered right to your door for less than the price of a vinyl record. It's amazing. Check it out right now. Click on the button up here. Here's Patty on her friendship with Eddie Van Halen and what might have been with the female Van Halen. So let's jump in because this is so interesting. I remember sharing urban legends as a kid about music. This is before the internet, so you didn't know if it was made up or not. You didn't have a place where you could go verify. But I remember the story going around about when David Lee Roth left Van Halen. And after Scandal dissolved, very interesting proposition when Eddie Van Halen asked you to replace David Lee Roth.
Do you know what year that was? 1984.
Right after, because, I mean, they had a big album with 1984. I mean, it's their biggest selling album since their debut.
It's crazy. And then I had the Warrior come out. And then Valerie said, let's go see Scandal. I really like Patty Smyth. I like this girl singer, let's go see her. And he's like, okay. And so she brought him to the show and they came backstage. We played in LA and I'm like, you want to come play with us? And he's like, sure. And so he came out and he sat in with us, and then they got on the tour bus with us. I mean, no musicians do that. They don't get on other people's tour buses. They got on the bus with us for like 3 days and did some shows with us. We were doing a joint, thing with John Waite. And so he started asking me then, it was before I met my then husband, before I got pregnant. So he was talking about it, but I was pretty deep into Scandal at that point and having my hit record and sorting that out. And then, I guess Jesus, it must have been into 85, because that we were staying in touch, and then he went back to LA. I was in New York and doing whatever, and then I got married in March, and he came back to New York to do, I guess Valerie was doing Letterman, and so he sat in with the band, and I went up 8 months pregnant. I went up to to watch them tape and to have dinner. And that evening, Schaefer was at the table, Danny Korchmar, the band was sitting, we were all at a big dinner. And he said, look, you got to let me know, if you can do it or not. If you want to be in the band. And I was like, no, I don't think so. Like, just like that. Nope. Didn't even give it a thought. And, I've thought about that so many times over the years, but, again, like I said, timing is everything, and for me, I was a diehard New Yorker. I was 8 months pregnant, and it's really important, I guess sometimes the way you're asked to do, like if he had said to me, let's make a record, when you're ready, like, let's just make a record together. And then I would have been like, okay. But to join Van Halen to me meant I had to leave New York. I had to uproot my whole life and move to California. He and his brother, were, partiers and, had a sort of like, they loved each other, but they had a volatile relationship. They weren't like the Kinks, but they fought, and I didn't drink or anything. So, it was kind of this thing where, like, I think my hormonal protective, so I just said no. And then he went and asked Sammy Hagar.
Let's talk about when you came into Van Halen.
Yeah, the mechanic, Claudio Zampoli, who, he was working on Eddie's Lamborghinis, working on my Ferraris. Dave quits. Eddie sees my car in his showroom there because I was on tour doing the VOA tour, just coming home from the VOA tour. And my car was there. And who's that? That's Sammy. You should get him in the band. That simple. Eddie said, do you have his phone number? He goes, yeah. Eddie called me from the shop.
Which was a surprise because, I wasn't even thinking how ballsy it was of him to ask a chick, because for him, it was just like, it was more about like, he just loved the way that I sang and felt like we could do something great together. And I really wish that we had done a record together. I didn't say no for any other reason, except that it was just, like I said, it was just the wrong time for me to feel like my life felt too heavy to pick up and move, and I wasn't thinking, I also, if you've ever been around a woman who's pregnant at 8 months pregnant, I wasn't thinking, I wasn't thinking it through, or what is this going to mean for my career? That's not how I made my moves anyway. So for a few years, I really regretted it. I regretted that I just didn't even think about it. I was like, no, I can't do it.
I had a little premonition I wrote about in my book, Red, about that I was sitting at dinner with my ex-wife, and the phone rings, and it's Ted Templeman, and talking about making my next record. And he goes, wow, man, you hear David Lee Roth just quit Van Halen? I said, really? He quit? He goes, yeah. I'm going, wow, what an idiot.
Yeah.
And I sat back down and I said to my ex-wife, she's the only one that knows this, only one I said it to, but like I said, I talked about it in the book. I said, they're going to call me.
Oh, wow.
Because it just, when it was that fresh in my brain, I thought, well, they're not going to quit. This is Eddie Van Halen, he's just starting, And I said, and I think, who could they call? They're going to call me.
So I didn't tell people about it. If somebody asked me about it and knew about it, like Howard Stern or someone, I would say, yeah, it's a true story. But it's not like I ran out saying, yes, I was asked to join. Everybody, needs to know I was asked to join Van Halen. Eddie was my friend and he didn't want me to say anything. And so I just didn't. It wasn't a big deal. And they made a good record.
I'm one of the three, me, Dio, or Ozzy.
And they went off and had all these these hits and this giant tour. And I'm like, damn it, my next record didn't do that well. I'm like, shit. So, and then I never talked about it because Ed had said to me, look, I'm not telling people that I asked you because I don't want Sammy to look like he was second choice. I was like, okay. And as time went on, I wouldn't have written Sometimes Love Just Ain't Enough. But there's a danger in loving somebody. I wouldn't have written No Mistake. There are no mistakes in love. I wouldn't have written I Should Be Laughing.
When I should be laughing.
Songs that I'm super proud of and that I'm happy that I wrote. And so, it's like sometimes we feel like we're making choices right or wrong, but it's almost like, and then on another level, I feel like the road just unfurls in front of us and we take it. And the road that I took led me to being married to the same person for 23 years. And, like my life has turned out pretty good, somehow the choice, even though I said no to that, because who knows what would have happened had I moved to California then.
It's fun to play the what if game because had you have done that, what would have been? It would have been called Van Halen. Because I heard that they were even thinking about not calling it Van Halen. There were a lot of different rumors about when David Lee Roth left. And
I think they probably would probably would have kept calling it Van Halen. I mean, it didn't matter to me what they called it. But I think, again, if it had been like, let's make a record. Let's just make a record and see what happens. Come in the studio. Then that would have been like, that would have been a way easier thing to wrap my head around than like, because, making a big commitment like that, I also had my own band and, there was my own record deal, it wasn't quite so easy in a way, but.
Well, what an honor though.
I think it just would have been great to have a chick singing in that band. It would have been amazing. And, the other thing to tell you, like, I was more like I said, I grew up on folk music and R&B and I can sing rock and roll. I love rock and roll, but it's not like, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I liked Van Halen because of Ed. You know what I mean? And I liked a lot of their, the songs that he wrote and stuff, like by 1984. Before that, like, I didn't really get it. They were very rock to me. So I would have liked to have seen what we would have come up with together, because I was bringing a whole other thing to the party, not just being a woman, but my musical influences and things like that. So that would have been very interesting. And then, what was so sad is I had this new record come out this summer, and this question has come up a lot. You were asked to, and I was talking about it a lot, not knowing how sick he was. And then he passed away, and it was so heartbreaking to think that, because, and I really, I know that he was really trying to figure out still, how to get the right band together, and what was the right mix, but he got to play with his son, which was great. And, things turned out okay, but.
Well, musical genius is thrown out, I think, too much in the time that we live in, but Eddie Van Halen was no doubt about a musical genius.
Well, I mean, I went deep on him. Like, I went in and watched all this stuff on YouTube after, and there's one where he's talking about, it was the American Dream. And it's in Pasadena, where he grew up, and he's talking to this woman, because his mother was Indonesian, his father was Dutch. His story is insane. And how he built these guitars when he was a kid because he couldn't get the sound. And that he's like a Les Paul. He and Les Paul were total, like, soulmates for sure. Not only was he like classically trained and he was brilliant, he was a brilliant musician, but he also was like this sort of inventor. Like, he invented all these new instruments and sounds and ways of playing that no one had done, and I feel bad because we don't have any guitar heroes. We've got a couple left, but after him, it's like there wasn't a next generation. He had, Jeff Beck and Hendrix and people, and then there was him, and then it's like, what happened to all these like great guitar players? Like, I don't know where they are. It's like, not me. Hopefully that's going to come back around again. There are some in country. There's some great country guitar players, that's for sure.
But Eddie Van Halen, he was kind of like, it's like, maybe this is a bad analogy, I don't know, but CEOs of companies, nobody knows who a CEO of a certain company is. They don't really remember a certain name. I mean, if you're talking about globally, but everybody knew who Steve Jobs was. Same thing with Eddie Van Halen.
Right.
Eddie Van Halen was the guitarist that everybody knew or knows. And except for Billie Eilish. No, I'm just kidding. Did you ever see that talk show where Jimmy Kimmel asked her, do you know who Van Halen is? She's like, no. He's like, what?
Can you name a Van Halen?
Who?
I'm going to start crying.
Eddie Van Halen was that guitarist. I mean, yeah, People know Jimmy Page's and Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton, but Eddie Van Halen just like was larger than life, and he was like this through line in even pop culture. I mean, you think of Back to the Future, the most iconic part is when he's playing the Eddie Van Halen part, and he just was this larger than life. And what I think was so great about him is that he just loved what he did so much, and you could see it in every performance.
Always, I know.
In his element.
He was very joyful. He was a happy dude, a joyful dude. I think that's true. But I didn't really realize, to be honest, when he did Thriller is when I was like, oh my God, like Beat It. It's the whole song. If he didn't do that solo in that song, I mean, it's just insane.
He put Michael Jackson on the rock map with that song. You know what I mean?
No, I know. And what was funny is he had to sneak in and do it because they didn't want him to do it. And it hurt his own record because he had that record out at the same time. Their album was out at the same time as Beat It. And it kept them from number one. And so his band was really mad at him for that.
Yeah.
His brother.
Speaking of 1984, all this going on in 84. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that, but what an honor for him to ask you to have gone to the show and to have heard you and knew that you would be a great front woman. It was
a really big honor. I'll always feel like that was one of the most amazing things that I totally wish that I had even said something slightly more profound, like, thank you so much for asking me. It's an honor. But I was like, no, I don't think so. Like that. We were friends. So I was like, no, I don't. Maybe you better find someone else. Like, what? You idiot. And I remember the look on Paul Schaefer's face. He was like, are you crazy? So.
What a story.
But I mean, like I said, everything, it's just weird how life unfolds. It's like, I don't know how all this time went by before I made a new record either. It's like, I don't know what the hell I've been doing, but I didn't even know I was going to get older, for Christ's sakes. It's like, yeah. I still feel like I'm 35. I don't feel much difference. I'm a little stiffer in my hips, I'm going to admit, when I do yoga. That's about it.
I heard somebody say something just brilliant in one of the interviews I did. I was interviewing Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil, great husband and wife songwriting team that wrote You've Lost That Love and Feeling and Got to Get Out of This Place and On Broadway and so many others.
Yeah.
What she said was, she nailed it. She said, when I was asked her certain things, she'd say, I don't know. I just didn't ever think about, I didn't ever look back and think about what this song meant because I was on my way to the next thing. I was just moving on to the next thing always. And I wasn't ever thinking about that. And that's really interesting. So I think a lot of musicians are that way. You're just thinking about the next day and you're not really thinking about age or the past. You're just moving forward. Speaking of the possible Van Halen multiverse, here are all the people that were rumored to be considered for the singer position before Sammy joined up. Daryl Hall. Actually, Daryl Hall confirmed the story in an interview with New York radio. When asked if the rumors were true, Daryl responded with this quote, "Actually, yes, I knew those guys really well. We actually shared some people, crew, things like that. Eddie came to a show with Valerie Bertinelli. This goes back, And David had just left the band, and Eddie said, do you want to join Van Halen, man? He was half joking, but I think he was serious. I really do believe that he was serious, and I took it seriously. I went, nah, I think not. I think I got my own stuff going on. Apparently, Steve Perry, the greatest ever, he was offered the gig at a point when things were kind of unresolved with Journey on shaky ground. That would have been something. Also, Sebastian Bach, formerly of Skid Row, he let it be known in an interview that he was going to possibly audition. He told Eddie Trunk in an interview in 2020 that there was talk about it. Bach said, and I quote, at the time they were looking for a singer, but I didn't get to audition. Now that one's kind of a head scratcher though, because Skid Row didn't form until 86 and Bach would have been like 16, maybe 17 years old. So having said that, leave us a comment. Which Van Halen would have been the best outside of Sammy Hagar? Would have been Daryl Hall, Patty Smyth, Steve Perry. He wanted to work with Joe Cocker as well. What would the band have done under those singers? Let's have a great discussion on what might have been below. It's kind of fun. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe. And until next time, 3 chords and the truth.